Afghanistan has been through 4 decades of war, and we have continuously tried to promote development and meet the needs of people in Afghanistan. And I think there is a growing realization that we have to more seriously take the peace agenda into account in the ways we work and what we are trying to achieve. It's also a critical time in Afghanistan right now, which is giving some hope, where there is talk about possible peace agreements, but perhaps quite little recognition that peace has to be sustained and owned and driven on the local level. So it's also a matter of making sure that we talk about sustainability of peace and not just peace on paper.
What can we do to contribute to an inclusive rather than an excluding peace process, should a peace process indeed emerge, which is still an open question, number one. And number two, what can we do to help ensure that the progress which has been achieved in the last 17 years, both constitutionally and in real terms as regards human rights, the rights of women, the rights of children, and in general the respect for a more pluralistic Afghanistan, that those gains not be reversed or sacrificed on the altar of a quick and dirty peace agreement?
Sustainable peace is only possible when majority of the population in Afghanistan or in any other society have access to enough resources to live a dignified life. But sustainable peace is possible when majority of people have access to education, to health, to make sure that they are free from the fear, they are free from the wants. Sustainable peace is possible when minorities of the population are included in the decision-making process. Women, children, ethnic groups, persons with disabilities.
Peace is not an event. It should include our daily life. We need to live with it. If we look at it as an event or as a document, I think we're putting ourselves in a very big risk. That's something we're doing at the moment.
So first of all, I mean, when we talk about peace building, we have to understand one thing. Peace building without context is the most dangerous thing you can do to a society. If you don't study the context and you don't come up with the programs based on the context, you divide literally the society. You actually do more harm to the society through peace building than you can do with anything else. War cannot harm as much as peace building can do if you don't literally take the context. And so sometimes I have a word for that. I call them jung building. Jung is the word war for. So I say peace building becomes jung building. So war building. We're doing peace building, but actually we're actually war building.
I think the local dimension is important because the phrase normally used about the peace process in Afghanistan is that it has to be Afghan-led and Afghan-owned. And that means that it has to be owned by all the people of Afghanistan, so that any eventual peace deal is something in which all the people of Afghanistan think they have a stake and they have part of the ownership. So whether that is a farmer in the rural south, a student in University Mazar, or a lady in Herat, they all have to feel they have some ownership of the peace plan and therefore the peace process. And also because there are many dimensions to the conflict in Afghanistan. At the one level you have the government versus the Islamic movement of the Taliban, and at the other levels you have lots of local community conflicts, old tribal disputes been going on for years over water, land, resources. So there is a local element to a lot of the conflict in Afghanistan anyway.
Because peace building is social transformation or social resolution of conflict, which is at the grassroots level, which is at the bottom level, which is at the local level. That's when we need to talk about local peace building.
It makes intellectual sense that we need to look at humanitarian interventions together with long-term development assistance and also in conjunction to security and peace. It also makes policy planning sense. It's quite easy to do nice matrices that links humanitarian with development, with peace and security. And obviously it makes ethical sense. If you can do many things at once, obviously you should try to. But as we noted in the excellent introductory sessions, both with the Ambassador Tiber's presentation of the sort of macro level politics, there's quite a bit of challenges in Afghanistan. And then linking that to the panel discussion on local peace building, showing how complex and how diverse the local realities is. So then, with that picture, it's obvious that we need to be a little bit careful with concepts and conceptual frameworks that make a lot of sense, because they might actually have very little to say about what's happening on the ground.
Be it the UN, bilateral donors, people like us, we are organized in these fragmented stovepipes. So here comes the development experts, and here are the other experts. And we need to organize ourselves around the context and the situation in a country where we can actually develop our instruments according to what is needed. It's not so simple, but I think that should be our contribution, that we humanitarians don't want to work with politicians, and by definition, development investment is a political gesture. We have to overcome some of these classical barriers that we own among ourselves. And as I said before, I know it's feasible, but I also know it takes its cost.
I think there's enough coordination going on in Kabul level, but what they can better coordinate, that's going to happen at the field level. It should be at the provincial and even at district level if possible. So that will improve their understanding. But at the same time, I think working with local peace building organization and civil society organization at the provinces would help the international organizations to understand the local contexts. So it might be a two-way learning process where the local organization are learning from the international organization who have international experience, but at the same time, the international organization can learn from the local organization who have been working in those areas for a longer time. And probably many of the organizations might be working for a short time in those provinces or districts. It might be better for them to have a partner who has worked there for a long time.
That is why I say there are a lot of potentials in the communities. They know how to approach certain issues, but the only thing, they are scattered, they are not organized, they don't know how to do it. Development workers and peace building should facilitate, and this facilitation, walking through together with the communities to solve their problems. This is, I think, will better work instead of giving the solutions.
We need to create mechanisms, stronger mechanisms of coordination on various levels, starting from the village level and starting from the provincial level, on how can we coordinate the humanitarian action, development, and peace building efforts on local level. Not only that, but then how can we create or link it to the efforts on national level? And from national level, of course, to the more broader international level, where the global governance, as I had indicated before, that it is not only the local causes.
I think the Red Cross has one unique instrument which also can contribute to creating the confidence that is required for building peace, and it's the principle of impartiality and neutrality, which are the most difficult ones to apply in practice, because as we can hear when we talk about conflict, there is always the other, the enemy that we would like to convert to being like me so that we can have peace. Once we actually agree that we have a common goal, and that requires some leadership, in fact. And how often, I mean, all of us who have worked in many settings, how often do we actually agree here that the common objective is peace? No, we talk about conflict, we talk about development, we talk about this. But when we actually set the common objective and we start aligning our resources so that we can work properly together, then the time of matrix filling in is over. So I have seen it working. It required good leadership. It requires, I think, the honest conversation that I think you mentioned also. Stopping to accept that we only look at our own interests, because that's the basic of the obstacles, is that we don't recognize openly and publicly that creating change recognizes that I am also willing to change, not just the other.
I think what I was reminded about, or I relearned, was how vibrant Afghan civil society is, and what a lot they have to say, and they've had to teach themselves English by and large to do it. But they've done it in a very articulate way, and I think we saw that very much so today. They also are able to challenge the international community more and more, to ask them to be better informed when they intervene, and to be aware of what their intervention is going to mean to people. And I think that's absolutely vital. I think I also was reminded that people talk to the Taliban all the time. And while one might know that, it's really important that we take it into account, that people are having to negotiate all the time with different power holders in their own local communities, and that you might not understand what's going on behind the scenes, whether they're in communities in a village or whether they're in communities in Kabul, a community of the elite. There are pressures on people that we actually, as internationals, often know very little about, but we should try and be more aware. I think I'm also going away with the view that local peace building is essential. Peace is built from below, and there is a lot of support for it at the moment. It may disappear again. I'm worried about that. But while it exists, I'm going away, I think, with renewed enthusiasm to try and support it and do something about it.
We don't usually talk so much about peace, but at the same time, that is actually why we are in Afghanistan, to be able to contribute to peace. I think it's also important to have this conference here now to keep Afghanistan on the Swedish policy agenda. We know that it is not so high up on the agenda in terms of the political discussion and so on, especially after the withdrawal of the Swedish forces. So I think that is also one important reason, and that's also why it's so important that we have, for example, people from the Foreign Ministry, from the Swedish Development Cooperation Agency here, and also from the media to actually give input to a continuous discussion and to presence of Afghanistan in the Swedish debate. I think also, I mean, it's a very convenient timing. We have a peace process, kind of. It's not ongoing, but we see some steps towards a peace process in Afghanistan, but it's mainly discussed and viewed at a very high level, like between the warring parties at the highest level, the conflicting, the government and also the armed opposition groups. So I think that one important point of this conference is to put the focus on the local level, of course not only on the local level, and I think that we have a really good composition of people to be able to do that, to respond to to give examples, concrete examples of challenges at the local level. I think that this also contributes to, we get a better understanding of how the conflict is, how people are living the conflict, but also how people, like in local communities, are living the peace. I think one thing that has been striking to me when I've been in Afghanistan and when you go out, especially through the rural areas, it's quite a peaceful community. So I think that there is something there, and many times when we discuss peace and conflict, we don't really get down to those rather peaceful relationships and environments that we actually can find in Afghanistan. So I think it's just as someone mentioned here in one of the panels of the morning, like how can we scale up, how can we amplify actions of peace, like peaceful practices in communities that are already there, of course together with all the conflicts, but they are also there. And I think also the panels and the composition, they bring to the table the question of peace, and also this discussion on the Triple Nexus, that it's not just about an event, it's not about signing a peace accord, it's about bringing justice, bringing human rights, bringing development into the peace process as one fundamental condition for people to be able to live a dignified life, and that's what the peace process is about. So I think that it's really a good group of people to have that discussion with.